You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
The beast is actually a fulfillment of a picture given to us by Daniel of a guy by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, Antiochus would always negotiate one thing and then do something else. Always. That's a war crime. It's called perfidy. And he did that over and over and over again. So the guy is actually a war criminal, if you want to call it that. He was not the rightful heir. He just kind of took over. He swept into power with guile and deceit.
In today's message, Pastor Ken is going to give us a very clear picture of who the enemy is and what his tactics are. The enemy works only through guile and deceit and false promises. In the war we fight against him, it's important to remember this: he will try to convince you that he's not so bad, and following him will bring you good things, but he's capable of telling the truth. If you don't know how he operates, you could fall into his traps. Stick around for a clear, full picture of the enemy you're fighting. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of 2 Thessalonians, chapter 2, as he continues his message, And the Beast Is.
In 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 7, these are the conditions that have to exist for you to see the beast, okay? Let no one in any way deceive you. It will not come unless the apostasy comes first. In other words, a massive turning away from God. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. And he goes on further, but towards the end of verse 7, he says, you won't know, though, because the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, but only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Who's the restrainer? It's the Holy Spirit. Where does the Holy Spirit live? In every single believer in the church. So once we're out of here, once the rapture occurs and the church is gone, there's no more restrainer. And that's when this person will be revealed. Actually, people who are here won't really know who it is until there's this 7-year treaty that's cut with the nation of Israel, that person will protect Israel for 7 years. None of the names I previously listed or any other name comes close, by the way. But if you want to know who the Antichrist is, the beast, Jesus Christ used a name pointed to an event historically, and Daniel actually predicted it in Daniel chapter 11. All the prophecies of this person, if we want to see who he's like, where he's from, what he does, what his reign is going to be like, is talked about in Daniel 11. And when you combine the prophecy with the history, you realize he's a type of the Antichrist, a type of the beast. It's a poor imitation of the real thing. And when you study who this guy was and what he did, he's bad enough. But in Daniel chapter 11, we're introduced to the type of the Antichrist. His name is Antiochus Epiphanes. This is actually a life mask made of him while he was alive. That's what he looked like. The rich guys could do that, the dead guys, the poor guys couldn't. So we do have likenesses of a lot of the emperors and kings because they couldn't afford to have, somebody do their picture. But this is the guy. Oh, by the way, we're given a lot of information in Daniel 11 about this guy. Jesus points to him. He says he is a type of the Antichrist. So if you want to know who Antichrist is, if you want to know who the beast is of chapter 13, you got to understand who this guy is. So here are the things that we're going to know that are significant about him. He was a Gentile king. He rose to power in the Seleucid Empire, which was based in Syria. Okay? Not Rome. Remember the location. That's part of the overall picture, because remember, we saw last week in Isaiah chapter 10 and Micah chapter 5, this guy's referred to as the Assyrian. Assyria is based in a place called Nineveh, which is now a big spot of land in the middle of Mosul, Iraq. But Syria was part of the Assyrian Empire. Now, this guy, Antiochus, had a rather high opinion of himself. He gave himself the title Epiphanes. which means manifest God. Okay? The Jews, by the way, had another name for him. They called him not Epiphanius, they called him Epimanes, which means the madman. By the way, here's the Seleucid Empire, and the Ptolemaic Empire is the one to the south with Egypt, and Israel was the buffer zone. They kept going back and forth and back and forth. But remember that outline of the Seleucid Empire, because over and over and over again I've studied that folks keep saying the Antichrist will come from the Roman Empire. Yeah, Syria was part of the Roman Empire, but everybody keeps pointing to Rome and say he's some Western guy. He may not be. He may not be. Daniel 11, 22 to 24. These are the prophecies about this guy. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. After an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception. He'll go up and gain power with a small force of people, and in a time of tranquility, he'll enter the richest parts of the realm, and he'll accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He'll distribute plunder and booty and possessions among them, and he'll devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. Okay. So Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, was successful in battling against Egypt. He had a unique way of fighting. It was his policy to offer friendship, alliance. I'm going to be your best bud. I'm going to do everything you need. And then he'd show up with his army and kill everyone. Nice guy. He did that constantly. As we saw in the first seal judgment, remember there's a gentleman called the Beast, the Antichrist, who rides a white horse, who takes over his enemies with rhetoric and trickery, conquering them with no arrows, but he has a bow? That's what Antiochus did over and over again. Except he'd also kill people if he couldn't get his way. In Revelation 6, 1 and 2, it says, I saw the Lamb broke one of the seven seals. I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as with a voice of thunder, come. I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went conquering and to conquer. So we're pointing to the beast. The beast is actually a fulfillment of a picture given to us by Daniel of a guy by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, Antiochus would always negotiate one thing and then do something else. Always. That's a war crime. It's called perfidy. And he did that over and over and over again. So the guy is actually a war criminal, if you want to call it that. He was not the rightful heir. He just kind of took over. He swept into power with guile and deceit, and he came to the throne in 175 BC. And he promised peace, but he flattered people, he deceived people. It was not unusual for him to go into the storehouse where all the money was, walk out on the streets and throw it to people. So they would love him. Then he'd turn around and kill them. Nice guy. One of the things that Antiochus Epiphanes, this is it here, right? He looted the treasure of the temples. He considered himself a god. And he'd go through the streets and he'd throw it to his followers. And then, of course, people would throw themselves on the ground to pick it up. But he was arrogant, incredibly arrogant. So in 170 BC, during a time of peace, he marched his army from Damascus, where they were at, all the way into the Nile Delta. And when they got to the Nile Delta, Egypt finally figured out, oh, hey, we have a problem. His whole army was already there. And he took possession of all the fertile places of Egypt under the pretense of peace. And then he laid siege to Alexandria and Naucratis, which were capitals of the area. Back to Daniel 11:25 to 28. He'll stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south, Egypt, with a large army. Oh, by the way, another name for the Antichrist, the beast, is the king of the north. So this is all starting to kind of fit together. The king of the south will mobilize, and by the way, it also says in Revelation he has a problem with the king of the south. Surprise, surprise. So the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he'll not stand, for schemes will be devised against him. Those who eat his choice food will destroy him, and his army will overflow, but many will fall down slain. As for both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they'll speak lies to each other at the same table, but it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time. Then he'll return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the Holy Covenant, and he'll take action and return to his own land. Now, Ptolemy's army are the ones that ate food with him, and they plotted against Ptolemy, the king of the south. And the battle was successful because They had Antiochus had spies. He had won over a bunch of Ptolemy's troops. They had him convinced that Ptolemy was a bad guy. And they actually did sit down for peace, and they lied to each other during the peace talks. And he left with a lot of money, a lot of stuff. And then he started paying attention to Israel. Now, here's what happened in Israel. There is a guy by the name of Jason. Jason wanted to be high priest, but he wasn't high priest. Now, at this time, Israel is really filled with apostasy. They were pretty backslidden. This is around 300 AD, somewhere in there. So, actually 175, that's what we're talking about, 175, 165. So, Jason offers Antiochus a bribe to depose the current high priest, Onias III. Antiochus says, oh, yeah, for money? Sure, not a problem. And then somebody else stood up and said he wanted to be high priest, and that was Menelaus. So he tried the same thing against Jason. And Antiochus said, sure, no problem. So here you have these pushing these two guys against themselves. Of course, Onias, the Jews respected, he lost his life. And Antiochus executed a lot of people for their roles in all of this. But he didn't punish Jason or Menelaus, but the people of Jerusalem, and again in response to bribes. So Jason, who wants to be high priest, attempts a coup d'etat when he thinks Antiochus is dead. Antiochus is not dead. Antiochus then enters Jerusalem and kills 80,000 people. Okay? Accompanied by Menelaus, and then he desecrates the temple in 168 BC. That's kind of the high level of what it is. Daniel talks about it, verse 29 and 30 of Daniel 11. At the appointed time he'll return, come into the south, but this last time it will not turn out the way it did before. Ships of Kittim, that's Cyprus, these are Roman ships actually, will come against him, and therefore he'll be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the Holy Covenant and take action. And he'll come back and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Again, 168 BC, Antiochus decides to go to Egypt again. He's met in Alexandria by Rome. Roman ships sail from Cyprus, also known as Kittim, and they stop him, and they return him home. So he goes home and decides to, let's go back to Israel. Now we go to 1 Maccabees, which has a history of this. Okay? 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 20 and 24. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 143rd year. He went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary, took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He also took the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. He's not done yet. He's just getting started, okay? And this is a picture of what the beast is going to be like. Just a poor picture of it, by the way. So Daniel again says, forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and then they'll set up an abomination of desolation. Jesus talked about that, and he says, when you see this guy go into the temple and do this, head for the hills. He says that in Matthew 24. So on December 16th, 168 BC, Antiochus' general Apollonius enters Jerusalem with 22,000 troops on the Sabbath. Okay? He killed lots of the city. He took the women of slaves as well as the children. And the goal was to eliminate Judaism and Hellenize the Jews. In the temple, Apollonius put up an altar to Zeus and sacrificed a pig. Not exactly what you're supposed to do. That's the abomination that caused desolation. That's a picture of what's going to happen that Jesus talked about, that this guy we're studying in chapter 13 is going to do. Again, it's in 1 Maccabees. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute. He came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them. They believed him. But suddenly he fell into the city and dealt it a severe blow and destroyed many people of Israel, plundered the city, burned it with fire, tore down its houses and its surrounding wall. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. They fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. They strengthened their positions. They stored up arms and food, collecting the spoils of Jerusalem. They stored them there and became a great menace. On every side they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled, and she became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her. This is what Jesus is talking about. The beast is going to be just like this or worse. Her dishonor was great as she grew, great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. The king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and they should give up particular customs. All the Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many from Israel also adopted his religion, and they sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And what he did is he directed them to stop doing burnt offerings, sacrifices. They could no longer read the Torah. They could no longer do circumcision. He made it illegal to be a Jew. They could no longer build altars. He made them sacrifice swine and unclean animals. I mean, basically, anything that was, as it says in 1 Maccabees, everything unclean and profane. So they would forget the law and change the ordinances. And then he said, if you don't obey the command, you'll die. So this is, again, the beast. This is what he's like. He appointed inspectors and commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice, town by town, but not sacrifice to God, sacrifice to Zeus. That's what they were wanting. Many people forsook the law, and they did evil in the land, and they drove Israel into hiding. And on the 15th day of Chislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrifice on the altar of burnt offering, and they built altars in the surrounding towns. And it just gets worse and worse and worse as you read through all of it. Jesus, at the time that he's in Israel, 250 years later, 150 years later, this is still fresh in everybody's minds. They still know this. They had already had a festival on it. And Jesus actually participated in the festival. It's known as Hanukkah. And we see that he participated in John chapter 10, verses 22 and 23. But again, this is a picture of what the beast that we see in chapter 13 is going to be like. He talks about it in Matthew 24, 15 to 18. When you see the abomination of desolation which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those who in Judea must flee to the mountains. I mean, it's a picture of Antiochus Epiphanes. That's what we see. Daniel gives us more information about this guy. And again, Daniel's writing in advance. By smooth words, he'll turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many, and they'll fall by sword and by flame, by captivity and plunder for many days. Now, when they fall, they'll be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. And some of them who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it's still to come at the appointed time. Literally, as we saw in Maccabees, many of the Jews participated in what was going on. They worshiped Zeus. In Maccabees 1:11, it says, men appeared in Israel who were breakers of the law, and they seduced many people. It was not a good time. And that's what this is being pointed at, as the beast is going to do the same thing, or worse, or worse. According to verses 33 to 35 in Daniel, there's a small group of faithful Jews who opposed the godliness of Antiochus. The priest who did so, his name was Mattathias. He had 5 sons. The number 1 son was Judas Maccabeus, also known as the Hammer. And they took the city back on December 14th and purified the altar. But this prophecy given to Daniel was about a guy who is a picture of who the beast was going to be, and it was literally fulfilled. Literally fulfilled. The example of the beast that we see in the reign of Antiochus was picked up by Jesus and picked up by John. So again, what have we learned? What does this point to? Okay, we know that the Jewish religion was desecrated on the 15th of Chislev when Zeus had an altar put up and erected in the temple, and sacrifices were made to Zeus. And it was desecrated and remained that way for 3 years. So in 167 BC, worship ended in the temple, and it remained like that until 164 BC in December, which is 3 years. The last half of the tribulation is 3.5 years. That's kind of an interesting time spread. But this is the example. He's a ruler from Syria. What is Syria today? Primarily Islamic, right? The Seleucid Empire is today primarily Islamic. Turkey, southern Russia, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia. I mean, literally, I love how Dr. Hickson puts it. He says that in every age, Satan has to have somebody ready to go. Because Satan doesn't know when the rapture is going to occur. He doesn't know when this all kicks off. So some of the people whose names I said earlier, that might have been the person that Satan had ready to go. And it just didn't happen. Every generation, he has to be ready to seize the moment after the rapture of the church. So, yeah, we've had a lot of despots throughout the ages. Hitler, Mussolini, Napoleon, any of them could have been it. Literally, as you follow the track of the studies that people have done, you'll see a lot of names of folks in that, and all of them could have been it. Charlemagne shows up there too. There's probably somebody alive today, or somebody actually serving as a governmental leader someplace who could be the next Antichrist. We don't know. We just don't know. In Daniel 9:27, it says, "He will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week." This is talking about the beast. "In the middle of the week, he'll put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that's decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." That's where we are right now in Revelation. We're at that point. We're at Daniel 9:27, okay? Revelation 12 and 13 is the same thing. We're at the middle of this point. So if we want to determine what the nationality of the Antichrist is, first we have to identify the pronoun it or he that showed up in verse 27 in Daniel. So, okay, who is that? It's the same person. Daniel 27, he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. So it's the same he using the rules of Hebrew grammar to its nearest antecedent, which was the Roman Empire. Okay? That was the nearest one, the prince that shall come, a reference to the Antichrist. So the prince that shall come is the same one who makes the covenant and refers to the Antichrist. Verse 26 states the prince that shall come will be the same nationality as the people who destroy the city and the sanctuary. So who destroyed Jerusalem and who destroyed the temple? And everybody says Rome, right? In 70 AD, the Roman Empire did it. The Roman Empire showed up with the 5th, 10th, 15th, 12th legions, and as well as the 22nd and the 3rd legion. Because there's historians who keep track of that stuff, who lived at the same time. They were assisted by significant forces, 60,000 troops, from Arab countries. Isn't that interesting? So does that mean the beast, the coming willful king, the Antichrist, is going to come from Rome? Well, again, Antiochus Epiphanes came from Damascus, Syria. He was part of the Seleucid Empire. Rome, yeah, included that area, but it's the same troops. Whoever destroys the city, whoever destroys the temple is going to be the same. Okay, great, got it. I understand. So it was the Roman Empire included, but not all the Seleucid Empire. It was maybe the western portion. By the way, if you look at the western portion of the Roman Empire, like France, it's becoming Islamic, just like what used to be the eastern portion.
Today's message was in the book of Revelation. Pastor Ken has been teaching from this prophetic book here on the Unsafe Bible. You hear often about people trying to predict the end of the world or referring to some kind of apocalyptic event. But the truth is, the real apocalypse or revelation of Jesus Christ is something unlike anything else. If you know Jesus, you see these events as something that God will bring about to eventually restore things to how they were meant to be. If you view God as an enemy, you would naturally perceive the events in Revelation as some foreign enemy seeking to wreak havoc on the world and bring it to ruin. So what's the truth? If you're curious about what we believe and what our core foundation is built on, go to theunsafebible.com to learn more. Are you in the Jupiter, Florida area? If so, you're welcome to join us for these types of teachings in person. You'll find ways to contact us on our website, so you can learn when and where we meet each week. You can also access more teachings online by going to theunsafebible.com and looking under the Media tab. Catch up on any messages you've missed, or listen to one you already heard as a refresher. Once again, that's theunsafebible.com. We're so glad you took the time today to hear from God and His Word. Pastor Ken has more to share from the book of Revelation, so don't miss a single edition. In the meantime, continue growing on your own in this very peculiar book of the Bible. And join us again on the Unsafe Bible.